What's going on, everyone? Today I'm going to give you my top 10 best movies of 2024. So this is of course my own personal ranking, just the movies that I felt like were the best out of this year. I have seen over 60 new movies from 2024. These are movies that released in the United States in 2024. Some of the movies on this list did come out in 2023, technically speaking, but they didn't actually release in theaters fully in the US until 2024. So obviously it would make sense for me to count it as a 2024 movie. I will be doing a much bigger ranking where I rank every single movie of this year in a tier list later on in a couple days. But for now, this is just my top 10 of the year. Let's start off this ranking with getting into some honorable mentions. I have quite a lot of honorable mentions because this year was a fantastic year for movies. There were so many incredible ones. With the honorable mentions, these aren't going to be in any particular order, so let's just get right into it. First of all, Challengers. Challengers was a movie I was really not expecting to like that much. I thought it was just a movie about tennis and that's about it, but I ended up really enjoying it. I really liked the dynamic between all the characters, just the very different relationships that Art and Patrick had with Tashi in this movie was really interesting. It was like a full-on tennis match between the two of them, metaphorically speaking, throughout the whole movie, while they're also, you know, showcasing their tennis match that they actually have later on in the movie. It was also just a very well shot movie. Everything looked fantastic, great cinematography, an amazing soundtrack, probably one of my favorite soundtracks of the year. And so I had to at least give this movie an honorable mention because it deserves it. Another movie I'm going to give an honorable mention to is Gladiator 2. I really enjoyed this. I thought the spectacle of it was fantastic. Ridley Scott still has it. He still knows how to make a damn good movie. I just think my only issue is I don't feel like the movie really justified its existence as much as it should have. I feel like it should have done a lot of unique and different things, but it just kind of felt like another Gladiator movie, which was still amazing for what it was, but I wanted a little more out of it, which kind of held it back from being in the top 10. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes was a fantastic start to the brand new era of Planet of the Apes movies, which I'm assuming is going to get a lot more sequels. I don't think it's one of the better Planet of the Apes movies. I would say the recent Reeves trilogy with Planet of the Apes was a lot better, but I still think Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes has a good role to play in this universe, and I like how it's kind of bridging the gap between that prequel trilogy and the newer films, which a lot of people say they're not really meant to be in the same universe, but that's besides the point. Just the general idea of it, they're kind of bringing them closer together, bridging the gap a little bit more. So I enjoyed it. I thought it looked fantastic and was overall a pretty solid movie. Alex Garland's Civil War I think also deserves to be an honorable mention. A lot of people didn't like this movie. A lot of people felt like it was a bit bland, didn't really have much to say, really didn't have a lot to it, but I don't know, I disagreed. I thought it was interesting to see war journalists and the lengths they will go in a war-like scenario to try and get the perfect shot in order to show the truth to the people. Like, I thought that was kind of an interesting concept, and it was just a really good looking movie. It had a lot of great visuals, a lot of fantastic scale to it. And was it what I was expecting out of a Civil War movie? No, not really, but I thought it was pretty good. And lastly, for the honorable mentions, I have Mads, or Mad S. I'm not really sure what you're supposed to say when pronouncing the title of this film, but this is a French horror film that I was incredibly shocked by. Like, I was not expecting this to be that great, but it ended up being one of my favorite horror movies of this year. It's a movie where the entirety of it is one shot. There's not a single cut that they do at all during it. It is just all one shot. Obviously, I'm assuming they did some cuts, you know, when they're actually making the movie, but they put it together in a way that makes it look like it's all one shot, and it's really cool. It's basically about a zombie outbreak. It's not really like zombies in the usual sense, but it feels like a zombie outbreak, and it is really gruesome. There's a lot of just brutal stuff to it, but it's really in your face and genuinely one of the scariest horror movies I've ever seen. I definitely recommend this one. I haven't seen a lot of people talking about it, so I thought I would definitely mention it in my honorable mentions. Now let's get into the actual ranking itself. In the number 10 spot is going to be Bad Boys: A Ride or Die, the fourth Bad Boys film. Now, I did do a reaction to this, have not posted it on the channel yet, but I had a great time with it. I honestly would say it's probably the weakest of the Bad Boys movies, but that is not saying anything negative on it whatsoever, because those movies are all really solid, all four of them. Genuinely, I think it's one of my favorite franchises that I've seen in a long time, because all of them are consistently really solid, and the fourth film was really no different. Marcus and Mike are a blast to watch as always. They just insanely fun characters. They're hilarious. Every action scene is really intense, and the actual emotional moments, they are there, they exist, and they work. And then next scene is usually another comedic scene that, like I said, is pretty hilarious, because these are very funny movies, which is nice, because I feel like nowadays there's not as many comedies that are that funny anymore. at least like ones that give me huge laughs, but this one really gave me a lot of huge laughs, so that's obviously a positive. I also like the inclusion of Mike's son Armando in this film. Obviously he was in the third one, but bringing him over into Bad Boys Ride or Die as a pretty prominent character who's now helping out Mike and Marcus, I thought that was really cool. I like the dynamic they had there. And in general, the villain of this film, McGrath, I thought was really interesting, really violent guy, really dangerous, but made for a pretty entertaining character. And just the overall directing of this movie, some of the coolest shots we've ever seen. There are some insane action sequences. One of my favorites involved first-person POVs that they did. I thought that was so sick. There was shots where, you know, Mike would throw his pistol up in the air, and you would track with the pistol, like the camera would be on the pistol, and then Marcus would grab it or something. It was just so sick, and you just can't hate a movie that has insanely cool shots like that. You literally just can't. So I really loved it. And the characters, a lot of them were coming back from Bad Boys for Life from the third film, and they were built upon in this one as well. And like I said, they were all really good characters. So really enjoyed this one. I really honestly wish I saw it in theaters, but at the same time, I'm glad I did it for a reaction, because now you guys can see my reaction whenever I end up posting it. I believe there is a fifth film coming out, and chances are it's probably going to be the last one, and I would be very curious to see how they're going to wrap up this franchise, because every time I think they're done, it's like nope, they got more in them. And oh, I can't forget about the Reggie scene. The Reggie scene was one of the best scenes in the movie. Just seeing him be a complete badass, taking a bunch of people out, that was so sick. So definitely recommend going to see this movie if you haven't already. If you haven't seen any of these Bad Boys movies, you can go watch them. They're hilarious. Definitely go watch them. In number 9 spot, I've got Hitman, directed by Richard Linklater. So I was pretty curious to see what this movie was going to be like. I went into it thinking it was going to be an action comedy, and that's not what it is at all. It is not an action comedy. There's little to no action in this movie at all. Rather, it's more of a romantic comedy, and definitely threw me off for a loop a bit, because I was just not expecting that, but I actually think it works extremely well. So the story of this movie is about this character named Gary Johnson, who works for this police force, and he ends up getting this job. He's a very like shy, timid guy. He's just very much in his own thing. He kind of just works with like the technology of the police force. He's not really like a full-on cop, but he ends up getting this position where he's pretending to be a hitman. And the reason they do this is so they can catch people who are trying to order hitman people to kill people for them, and obviously they need to arrest those people. So he ends up doing this job, and he pretends to be all these different types of people based on the criminals they are trying to catch, which is really interesting because he's a psychology teacher in the movie as well. So he understands people quite a bit. He understands what will make them, you know, trust him. So he kind of changes his personality based on the person, the information he knows about the person, which was really fun to watch. Like genuinely, I think this is Glenn Powell's best performance I've ever seen him in, because of him just constantly changing all these different personalities and doing it so damn well. What ends up happening in the movie is he comes across a character named Madison, who is trying to order a hitman to take out her abusive husband, and he ends up kind of falling for her and having this chemistry with her, and he doesn't want to get her arrested, but it ends up putting him in this very complex situation, because he doesn't want to get himself in trouble or her in trouble, but he's also not supposed to be having this romantic relationship with someone who originally they were going to arrest. And this whole thing happens, and I don't want to get into the rest because all the rest is spoilers, just in case you haven't seen it, but it is really cool. And it's all just, you know, a romance for a lot of it, because he's falling for this woman, but it's also a drama, heavy drama, in the sense that he doesn't know what the hell to do. Like, he genuinely doesn't. And it's so cool to see what he actually ends up doing. But all this whole time, he's pretending to be this other personality with her, because it's just the thing he's been doing, is he's trying to be the other personalities. So it's just a really fun movie. There's a lot of good comedy to it, but it's also really intense, has a lot of good tension to it. So I definitely recommend watching this. One of the best of the year, for sure. In number 8 spot, I've got We Live in Time from John Crowley. So this is a movie starring Florence Pugh and Andrew Garfield that came out this year, and I knew going into it that it was meant to be a very emotional and sad movie, and it fully lives up to that completely. It is a very devastating film. So the movie is about Florence Pugh's character Almut, who gets cancer, and she has this relationship with Andrew Garfield's character named Tobias, and they're essentially just dealing with that conflict, the fact that she has cancer, but they're not really sure exactly what they should do, because, you know, she could obviously go on chemotherapy and then her quality of life will be significantly reduced, but it also increase the chance of her living so that she can have a longer life. Or should she just enjoy the time she has and likely die really soon, but she could at least enjoy those final months, because obviously chemotherapy is not a guarantee at all. You could still end up dying. And so it just deals with the concept of time a lot. Like, should you enjoy the time that you have, or should you try to expand that time that you have, even if it might lead to, you know, unsure consequences? And it's really devastating. It really makes you think a lot. It really makes you question like what you should be doing with your life, because like anything can happen, anything horrible can happen to anyone, and you obviously don't want your time to be up before you actually got a chance to enjoy it. So that was just really, really well done. I think it was probably Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh's best performances of their entire career. They did an absolutely phenomenal job, so I definitely recommend watching this. Not an easy movie to watch, but I liked it quite a bit. I really enjoyed also the fact that a lot of it was out of chronological order. It wasn't just a straight linear film. They had a lot of scenes that took place later on in the future, and then scenes that took place later on in the past, and they kind of just mixed it all together in a way that actually worked really, really well. The soundtrack was great too, so yeah, definitely recommend this film. In number 7 spot, I've got Dune Part 2. So this is a film that I feel like a lot of people are probably going to put a lot higher. They're probably going to put this on number 1 spot, then number 2, and number 3. And I completely understand that. Like, I don't have anything against someone putting it higher than me. That's completely fine. But for me, the one thing that holds Dune back a little bit for me, well, Dune Part 2, is that I just haven't really found a full attachment to this world or these characters as much as other people have been. Not to say I don't feel attached to it at all. I definitely do enjoy the story, but I don't have like this deep, deep attachment to it to the point where it's this movie that I would be putting it in a really high regard. But technically speaking, the movie is fucking amazing. It is gorgeous. It has some of the best directing I've seen to date, to be honest. The soundtrack is insane. Like Hans Zimmer, I mean, he's an all-timer when it comes to composers, and he does a fantastic job in this movie. There's one piece of music in this movie that I think is genuinely my favorite piece of music of all time, at least in the top 5. Like, it is fucking amazing. And yeah, you can't deny how incredible this movie is. But I can't put it higher just because I just don't have that same attachment to the story or the characters or the world, at least not entirely. Like I said, I still really enjoy it though. I do really like what they're doing, especially with Paul Atreides and the role his character has in this movie, the fact that he's almost like going down a darker path. And I just really thought that was so cool, and the way they were able to show that a lot of times without even telling you. Like, they weren't explicitly telling you, oh my god, this is what's happening in the story. They were showing you with the shots, and it was just insane, man. It was such an insane experience to witness on screen. The whole third act especially was just jaw-dropping. But even just scenes before that, I really loved seeing the different scenes with the Freemen and, you know, on the sandworms and stuff and riding them. Like, all that stuff was really, really cool. So in general, a phenomenal movie that definitely deserves all the praise it gets. It's definitely better than the first Dune, but I don't think it is like one of my favorites, even if it is fantastic. In number 6 spot, I've got Deadpool and Wolverine, which, yeah, okay, all right. This is one of those movies that I know for a fact could go down as I rewatch it over time, because this happened with Spider-Man No Way Home. It was a movie that I loved the first time I saw it, and I still do love Spider-Man No Way Home, but I don't think it's as good as it was the first time I saw it, because a movie that has a lot of nostalgia and fan service, you're bound to enjoy it more in your first experience than you are like years later, where that nostalgia kind of wears off and the fan service stuff kind of wears off, you know. So it's bound to happen. But I think even beyond all of that, it still is a really damn solid film. Like, it is a really, really cool movie. The only thing I don't like about it is some of the visuals. I think some of it doesn't look too great, especially the scenes in the desert. A couple of scenes feel cheaper than they should be, which doesn't make any sense to me because it's a fucking Marvel movie. Like, they should have the budget to make it look better, but for some reason some of the scenes just don't look great, and I never really understand why that's the case. But beyond that, the story is amazing. I really do like what they were able to do with it here. They were able to take a character who is, you know, not around anymore and do a different variant of him with Wolverine, and actually do a story that kind of not as nearly as good as Logan, don't get me wrong, but it has its own purpose to it, where it's this version of Logan that he just feels so worthless. He feels like he let everyone down, he let the X-Men down, and he wants to try to redeem himself, and in this movie he gets a chance to do that, and it's really, really cool. And I like seeing his journey with Deadpool here, because Deadpool had a very similar journey to go on. He wanted to be something, he wanted to have, again, a purpose, a role in his world, and he kind of just is looking so far beyond what he already has. Like, he already has a lot, but he wants more. He wants to be with the Avengers, stuff like that. And the movie itself, yeah, it's all over the place when it comes to its story. If you're not like keeping up with the lore of Marvel, you know, if you don't understand like what the TVA is, obviously a lot of that shit's not going to make any sense. But when you do keep up with it, you do kind of understand what's happening, and I do think a lot of it worked for me. When it comes to like the fan service type stuff with the cameos, I think a lot of them worked because a lot of them were actually like more than just cameos. Like Daphne Keene's X-23, she was not just a cameo in this movie. She had a full-on character to play in the film, and that was cool. You also had, spoiler alert if you haven't seen Deadpool and Wolverine, Blade returning, which I mean nobody in a million years would have thought that would happen. Out of any characters I expected to see come in this film, it was not Blade. It was not him, but he did, and I was blown away by it. I was like, this is awesome, this is great. Didn't really have too much of a character arc or anything like that. He was just kind of there to do some cool action scenes, but they were freaking amazing. So yeah, that's that. And then obviously there was a bunch of other ones as well, a bunch of other cameos and stuff like that that definitely improved the quality of the film, at least a little bit for me personally, just because, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what you expect out of a multiverse film. It's an expectation, so I'm glad they actually went through with it. And it is a Deadpool movie, so obviously you're going to be expecting some good comedy, and yeah, it has a lot of good comedy. It is a fun, crowd-pleasing movie that deserves the praise it got, and I really loved it. I get why some people didn't. I do. I think it is a little too much for some people. It's a little odd for some people. It's cheap fan service to some people as well, but I don't know, for me, I didn't really see it as cheap fan service. I just felt like the visuals were a bit cheap. That's the one thing I'll complain about, is the visuals. Don't know how they did it. And honestly, the one thing that really brought all together was that end credit sequence where they showcased that montage of all the X-Men characters. I know it's not really part of the movie, but that brought some emotions to me, man. That brought some real emotions to me. So I was like, all right, this is cool. I wish they just touched it up a little bit better, put a little bit more like actual care into that part of it, rather than just kind of saying, whatever, who cares? Because that's what it kind of felt like. They just didn't really care about that side of it. But the movie still has great like action, great directing. It's just the visuals that just didn't work. Not the CGI or anything like that, but I just mean like the color grading and the lighting. That just didn't really work. The set pieces looked kind of cheap, so stuff like that. In the number 5 spot, I've got Twisters, which is not a movie I was expecting to be this high in my ranking at the end of the year, but it ended up being that. I really had fun with this. I liked it even more than the original Twister, which I just watched for the first time this year. I actually haven't seen it before. And so when Twisters came out, I was like, okay, hopefully this is just going to be a solid, movie. But it was more than that. I feel like it was a really well-made action flick. One of the best summer blockbusters I've seen in a while. Another movie with Glenn Powell in it. He's got 2 movies on this list, and he was fantastic. I don't think he was as good in this as he was in Hitman, but he was still really great in this as well. And I mean, just the tension, the spectacle of this was just really grand. The actual scenes where the tornadoes were just ripping through towns in this movie, like, they were really intense because they really made sure to showcase how dangerous it could be, showcase the amount of damage it could do, and just make you like, absolutely scared for your life. A lot of what made the tornadoes in this movie so scary had to do with the sound design. That was absolutely incredible. I believe I saw this in Dolby. Sometimes I forget if I saw something in IMAX or Dolby, but regardless, it looked gorgeous. It sounded gorgeous. Everything was pretty solid. Daisy Edgar Jones was also in it, and she had really solid chemistry with Glenn Powell in this, and their back and forths were pretty cool. The whole cast was just really fun, energetic, just absolutely knew what kind of movie they were in, and just embraced the hell out of it. So definitely one of the best films of the year. In number 4 spot, I've got George Miller's Furiosa, one of the new Mad Max films. Yes, this was absolutely insane. It was my favorite movie of the year for quite a while, because the other 3 movies on this list, on the top 3, are going to be movies that came out after Furiosa, and I was so excited for Furiosa because I really love Mad Max Fury Road. I think it's one of the best movies of all time. So when I heard they were going to do a prequel with Furiosa, I was pretty excited. And of course, Anya Taylor-Joy is playing Furiosa here. She did a phenomenal job in the role. Like, she is definitely becoming one of my favorite actresses, but she just embodies this character so well, to the point where, like, at some moments I didn't even notice it was her. Like, I didn't even feel like Anya Taylor-Joy anymore because of it. So I think what works so much about this movie is that it's not just trying to be Fury Road again, but in a different way. Rather, the movie itself is very different. Like, the different action scenes are very different. The vehicle chases, they're very different. They find a way to make things just very different and new. The structure of the movie is very different too, because Fury Road was just a 2-hour long vehicle chase basically, and just the insane spectacle of that which was amazing. That's what Fury Road was. Whereas Furiosa is attempting to just be a full-on prequel story for Furiosa, obviously. So you're going to get more of her life involved. You're not just going to get these really long vehicle sequences. Rather, you're going to get a few here and there that kind of intertwine with just other character building moments. And she has a lot of character building moments here. And another amazing thing about this movie is Chris Hemsworth. Holy shit, easily his best performance of his entire career, at least in my opinion. He was amazing. He embodied this villain so perfectly. He was terrifying. He was intimidating, and I absolutely loved it. But obviously, what makes this movie work so well, just like Fury Road, is just the gorgeous, colorful visuals, the insane action sequences. That's what you're watching this for. And it is probably one of the best looking movies of the past couple years. I would argue it's better looking than Dune Part 2. I know a lot of people are going to say Dune Part 2 looks better. I think Furiosa looks better personally. It's just my opinion. I think there's just a little bit more creativity with some of the visuals, and they just go so far with it, and it's just, oh, I love it. I love that stuff, and I absolutely loved this movie. Now, cracking into the top 3, in my number 3 spot, Joker Folie à Deux. I'm not kidding. This is not a joke. This is not a prank. Joker 2 is in my number 3 spot. Because I like order. And I love it. I've already done 2 videos going over my thoughts on Joker 2 and why I loved it and why I thought it worked a lot better than people are giving it credit for. So I won't go too in depth here, but I'll go, slightly in depth. But I really do think this is a film that is incredibly misunderstood. And when I say that, I'm not saying that you have to be misunderstood if you dislike it. No, of course, you can totally understand the movie and still dislike it. That's fine. But I do think a large chunk of the people who dislike it kind of got the wrong idea out of it and don't really fully understand what it was trying to do, which is okay. Again, that's fine. But I just do feel like a large chunk of people have gotten that impression. Basically, anyone who is saying that this movie is giving a middle finger to the fans of the first movie, I don't believe that you fully understood the film, because that's not what it was saying at all. Perhaps it was giving a middle finger to people who misunderstood the first film. That's entirely possible, but it's not changing anything about the first movie. The first movie was never saying that what Joker is doing is good. It was never acknowledging that he is doing something right, or that this is good for him, or that this is healthy for him. It was never saying that. It was just showcasing a story from Arthur's perspective about what an awful society can do to a person who already has a bunch of mental illnesses. The fact that it could bring that person to do something as horrible as murdering others, even if those people he's murdering are not very good people. And that's really the whole point of the movie. Like, he is the villain of that first film, but the movie's not saying it's a good thing. It's not. It never said that was a good thing whatsoever. No one should be the Joker. That's not a good thing, right? So what the second movie decided to do, because it wasn't originally going to exist in the first place, but what Todd Phillips clearly wanted to do is he wanted to do a story that kind of takes that concept and says, well, okay, what if we make Arthur understand that? What if we make Arthur do some self-introspection and kind of understand why that's not good for him and why the people who are supporting him don't actually care about him? And yeah, okay, could they have done a Bonnie and Clyde style movie where Joker and Harley Quinn, escape from Arkham and killing anybody who gets in their way? And yeah, of course they could have done a movie like that. And would it have been great? Probably. I'm sure that would have been fun. I think Todd Phillips just wanted to do something a bit deeper than that. He wanted to do something a bit more unique, a bit more creative and interesting, and I feel like he kind of nailed that with this movie, because it is trying to be a full introspection into his character. At least it's what he is doing himself. That's what Arthur is doing in this film, and it takes a lot for him to fully realize that. I think one of the most important scenes is the courtroom scene with Gary. That's when he fully kind of starts to understand, yeah, like I did some messed up shit that hurt more people than just the people that I've deemed to be evil. Right? It hurt others as well. It hurt this Gary guy who was completely innocent. So I think that worked for me. And then he realized in the end that these supporters, they don't care about him. They don't give a shit about his mental illness. They just support him because he's on their side. He's on the same side as them. He's killing people that they don't like. So that's why they support him. They don't care about his mental illness. They don't care about the fact that he's not doing well. If he gets replaced by some other Joker a week later, they'll go move on to that guy, which is why, spoiler alert, in the end of the movie, they ended up doing that. They ended up having a whole switcheroo where another Joker comes into play, because that was showing that this can go on forever. You can have a bunch of new Jokers appear and people won't ever care about the individual person behind the mask. That is an interesting concept. It is. I'm sorry, it's a fucking great concept. It's a really interesting concept for a movie. Yes, they could have just had him kill a bunch of people. Yes, they could have done that and that, but that's what the first movie did. The first movie already had him kill a bunch of people. Why would we do a repeat of the second film, but just throw in Harley Quinn? It could have been nice. It could have been cool, sure. But this to me was more interesting. This to me was a deeper story to tell with the character, and I appreciated the hell out of that. Now, of course, it was a musical, right? And a lot of people don't like musicals. So if you don't like a musical, yeah, okay, I understand why you might not like this movie. That's fair. That's like the most fair piece of criticism I could hear, because that's just a very personal preference sort of a thing, where if you don't like musicals, okay, sure. But I think personally, I have nothing against musicals. They're not usually my like number one preferred genre, to be honest, but I think the way this movie handles it makes a lot of sense. It doesn't feel forced because they're not like singing their dialogue, right? That's what a usual musical is, where they're singing their dialogue, and sometimes that can come across as a bit cheesy. Sometimes, I'm not saying that's a bad thing though, they're kind of meant to be that way. But this one is not like that at all. It's not trying to be a musical like that in that sense. Rather, it's just actual songs that they're singing. Now, the music that they're singing, yes, it has an importance to the scenes that they're in, obviously, but it's not meant to be like they're just singing their own dialogue like a lot of musicals are. And I think it has a purpose. Yes, it didn't need to be that way. They could have done this movie without the musical aspect for sure, but I think the reason why they decided to make it a musical is, well, first of all, because it was really interesting and unique. I think that deserves some credit there. We've never had a comic book movie, superhero movie with a musical aspect to it. That to me was already really unique. Well, I guess technically there's been some stuff similar to that. Like I remember there was some special I watched years ago that had singing. I don't remember, but regardless, this is a very unique thing for like live action superhero films, especially in like DC. It was just a crazy thing for them to do. But I think it worked because in the first film, Arthur already was someone who was clearly influenced by music. He danced a lot in that movie. He even sang at the end of the movie. He did. I'm not saying they were always planning to do a musical, but I'm just saying he always had music in him in a sense where he was trying to just escape from the world and just, you know, embrace music, because that's something he truly loved a lot. And so this movie comes around, and Harley Quinn is very much a character who, in this movie, loves music and embraces it as well. She believes it's like their way of escaping too, and then so they kind of just do it together, and then that happens multiple times throughout this film. My only negative with this movie really is that I do feel like the musical sequences could have been grander. They could have been bigger. They could have been more highly scaled, but they just really weren't. They were a lot more smaller, and some of them were cool, don't get me wrong, but a lot of them also were just the characters sitting there and singing, and I felt like you should have done a little bit more with it. Go a little more crazy with that idea. Actually have the characters like do, you know, bigger things, dance around the room, and then have the room turn into some crazy thing. Like they should have done more stuff like that. There was a couple really good ones, but a couple of them weren't so good. So I think that's one of the more important things to mention. The music was great though, for sure. Can't deny that. So this was a movie that I think is eventually going to become more loved over time. I think people will truly understand it maybe like 20 years from now. I think, to be honest, it's going to be one of those like hidden gems that, I don't know, people just, I hope, because I don't get it. This is, in my opinion, the most underrated movie of all time. I'm going to just throw it out there now. And yeah, one of my favorites of 2024. In the number 2 spot is Juror Number 2. So this is a Clint Eastwood film that literally like came out, I think like last month or something, or maybe two months ago, but I only saw it like last week. And this is a movie that I really like the premise of it. I thought it was really interesting when I read the synopsis. So I was like, okay, I definitely want to watch this before the end of the year because it has potential to be in my top 10. In no way, shape, or form did I think it was going to make my top 2, but it did. It did. And I am very, very happy about that because yeah, this movie was insanely cool. I'll give a small rundown of what this movie is about. I do think this is a movie that you should go into it not knowing too much. So if you don't want to know literally anything, maybe just skip over this part of the video. But I'll just give a small synopsis here. So it's about this character named Justin Kemp, who is just a typical guy. He's got some problems with alcohol, or at least he used to have problems with alcohol, and he's now sober. But you know, other than that, he's pretty much just a typical guy. And he's doing jury duty because obviously a lot of people got to do their jury duty. And he realizes that the murder case he's doing jury duty for is actually something that he committed himself. And it makes more sense in the context of the movie what I actually mean by that. Just to give a very short description, he basically just thought he hit a deer, but then he realizes in this murder case that when he actually had that happen, it was not a deer. It was actually a person. He just thought the deer got away or something, but no, the person just like fell off the side of a cliff or whatever. Yeah, very insane premise already, because it's like, holy shit, like what do you do in that scenario? And he's sitting here having absolutely no clue what to do, because obviously if he tells them, oh shit, like I was the one who did that, sorry, he's gonna go to jail. Like it's just gonna happen. So I think the movie does a really interesting job of showcasing a lot of the flaws with the justice system, because this movie showcases how a lot of times they won't really care to find new evidence, because the evidence they already have, they can already like do enough to prosecute someone. They could already do enough to put someone away behind bars, but more evidence could possibly change things. It's just they don't know how to find that evidence. So even though they don't have concrete evidence for the guy they're trying to put behind bars, they just want to get this case over with. They do not want to deal with all the paperwork and all the court cases and the court hearings and all that stuff. They just want to get over with it. So they're just kind of like, this is enough evidence, we could put the guy away. But it's not really fair. And then you have a lot of these really interesting conversations that these characters have, especially within the jury itself, where they're sitting there like, well, we just kind of want to go home. Like, we don't really care. Like, well, he probably did it. He probably murdered this woman. But we know as the audience that he did not murder this woman. We know that this person is innocent, and that the main character, Justin Kemp, is actually the one who accidentally murdered this person. So it puts us in a very difficult situation. And you do know that the person who is being convicted of the murder, he's not a great guy. Like, he apparently was like, you know, kind of rude and stuff like that. And so he kind of fit the description of someone who could murder this woman. But you're just sitting there like, well, shit, he didn't do it, so he doesn't deserve to get put behind bars. But Justin Kemp also didn't mean to do it. It was a complete accident. And if he tells them, he's going to get arrested. It's just going to happen. So it's such an interesting moral dilemma that puts these characters through, and you have no idea how he's going to figure things out. You have no idea how he's going to solve this problem. And that's what makes it such a fantastic movie, because you put a normal, typical guy in an impossible situation. Obviously, that's going to make for a fantastic movie. It has to, and it does. It really gave me a lot to think about, and I think it has some of the best dialogue of the year. One of the best like screenplays of the year. It's just such a good, well-written story that has like no loose ends. Everything is just so perfectly tied up by the end of the movie, and definitely made for one of the best movies of the year. And in the #1 spot is going to be Alien Romulus, a movie that I was very excited for, because I've been wanting another Alien film ever since I got into the Alien franchise a couple years ago. And so I was just like, okay, I really want to see what they're going to do with a new Alien film. And it blew me away. I really, really loved this, to the point where it actually became my favorite Alien film, which probably sounds crazy to some people, but it's just the way it is. I really think this surpassed all the other ones. I will get this out of the way though. The one big flaw with this movie is, spoiler alert, the whole CGI necromancy, that's what they're calling it, CGI necromancy, of Ian Holm, the actor who played Ash in the original Alien. And yeah, I had a problem with that. I thought it was kind of weird. It was like just this forced fan service sort of a thing that didn't need to exist and felt kind of just odd. It didn't ruin the movie for me. It ruined it for a lot of people, and whatever. I can kind of understand that, but I don't know. I'm not gonna let something like that ruin a movie for me. It was just something that I just feel like they shouldn't have done. And there's a couple other like forced callbacks to the original that just kind of felt like, okay, you didn't have to do that. It felt more out of place than anything. But other than that, this is fantastic. It's one of the best looking movies of the year. Absolutely gorgeous scenes. The space stuff looks fucking phenomenal. The soundtrack is phenomenal. Fede Alvarez genuinely becoming one of my favorite directors of all time. He really cares a lot about practical effects, and he goes really, really far with doing a lot of good stuff with practical effects. A lot of the xenomorphs in this are fully practical effects, and they look amazing. Like, the xenomorphs, some of the best looking ones we've ever seen. Kaylee Spaney, David Johnson, and Isabel Merced are definitely the standouts of this movie when it comes to the cast. Probably one of my favorite casts for an Alien movie, to be honest. And I just think the overall tension of every scene just felt so like incredible. And the way it was structured, where like the beginning of the movie, you obviously just had these characters who just wanted to get off this planet. They just hated being on this planet, and they felt like researching the station might give them hope of actually getting out of the planet, because they need this different technology to actually help them go into hypersleep to get off the planet. And when they get there, they come across the face huggers and all that stuff, and the face huggers are obviously pretty terrifying, but then it builds up to later becoming the full xenomorphs. And then, without spoilers, that thing in the end of the movie, which is still one of the most nastiest things I've ever seen in a movie. That thing was disgusting and creepy and weird and scary, and I loved it though. So this whole movie deserves all the praise it got. I think it got a decent amount of praise. At least I can recall it getting a lot of praise. It was just that one thing that they did with Ian Holmes' character that I think was just kind of, it put a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. Still a fantastic movie. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I have a lot more videos planned for end of the year lists. I'm going to do a ranking of all the TV seasons of this year as well that I saw. I'm going to do a ranking of my top 10 most anticipated TV shows of next year and my top 10 most anticipated movies of next year as well. And I'm going to do a full tier list ranking of every single movie that I watched in 2024, but I'm going to do that in a live stream, hopefully within the next coming days. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you on my next one. Peace out.